Hey everybody, welcome to part 2 of this video. If you haven't checked out part 1, I suggest you do because it gives you an overview of the planning I did to get me prepared for the Cambridge PhD interview. In this video I want to talk about the interview itself, and I don't see why we shouldn't just get straight in. So part of the motivation for actually making this video is that when I found out I had an interview at Cambridge for the PhD, I looked on YouTube because that is my want. What YouTube doesn't have in terms of content isn't worth watching. But I actually couldn't find a single video by anybody who'd had a PhD interview at Cambridge. I was just panicking because, you know, undergraduates looking for similar advice, there's a cornucopia of advice for undergrad interviews. So I thought I would just put my experience out there and demystify the experience. One thing that's particularly distinctive about the PhD interview is that there are no niceties to begin with. As soon as I went live on Skype, my interviewers really didn't make any attempt to gently coax me into the interview. There was no why Cambridge or how's your trip. This is a Skype interview, there's not going to be any of that stuff. But I think it's something to be prepared for, that this isn't going to be like an undergraduate interview where your interviewers will presume you're very nervous. None of that obtains in a PhD interview, at least from my experience, and also from the experience of my friend who said that similarly in her situation there were no niceties. The first question I was actually asked was, tell us what most excites you about your proposed PhD thesis. Now, I have unbounded enthusiasm for my doctoral project. If you get me in front of anybody, they will tell you that my enthusiasm for it is pretty unbridled. At the Christmas party, I spent an entire hour or more talking about moral hydraulics. I'm not going to disclose too much about that on the internet at this stage, just because of a little bit of trepidation about kind of intellectual property, because obviously, you know, it's my PhD. I covet it dearly. After I'd explained what most excites me about my doctoral project, I basically entered into a back and forth that lasted for 40 minutes. It reminded me of an intense conference Q&A. If you've never been to an academic conference, you might not know what I'm talking about here. Just imagine that you have across from the table somebody playing devil's advocate with you. With your thesis idea, this person across the table is one of the most exemplary philosophers in the world. And you are on the hot seat, taking question after question, being browbeaten, I suppose, but in an admittedly fun and exciting and exhilarating way about your interpretation or about claims that you make. In my last video I mentioned that in preparation for this interview I was told by my friend that the main focus would be on my writing samples. As it turned out, there was only one question on my writing samples in the entire interview, and it was one of the final questions. So 39 minutes of my interview were about my research proposal. I had spent the 5 days leading up to my interview cramming my writing samples and writing counter-arguments to the arguments I present in those papers. I can't say I was disappointed that the main focus of the interview was my research proposal, because I know my research topic inside out, and my research topic just fills me with immeasurable enthusiasm. So the fact that I was given 40 minutes worth of opportunity to display my excitement for this project was actually just, it was just amazing. I felt like I really took control of this interview and I was completely in command of every question. Nobody was more surprised by that than me. I was really nervous about this interview. Interviews are scary. Skype interviews are particularly scary because there's that added element of things going wrong technically. There might be a lag in the transmission. Can you imagine trying to have a sort of intense philosophical tete-a-tete with someone's internet lagging? It would be an unspeakable disaster. Everything on that front was completely perfect. I really felt like the stars aligned for me that day. It was just unreal. All in all, the interview was an intense philosophical conversation. They were trying to push me as far as I could go, basically. I discovered that there's a good reason for this. So the actual purpose of the interview, it turns out, isn't to decide in normal cases whether you're going to get a place. They've decided already that they want you. The interview's purpose is to rank you for funding. Of all the people they shortlist, they want to make offers of places to those people. But they interview those people to create a ranked hierarchy of those who most deserve funding. I'm really glad I didn't know that before my interview, because knowing that would have actually created a more pressured environment. I was very content with the thought that, okay, I'm sitting here and I'm proving to you I'm worthy of a place. To me, that seems like an easier feat to achieve than to sit here and try to persuade you to give me going on for £80,000 worth of funding. I'm sure you can see where this is going. After the interview, or rather at the end of the interview, the Knightsbridge Professor of Philosophy says to me, "Thank you so much, Louise. That was wonderful and great fun." I'm sort of thinking, I'm glad you thought that, because it was hard. It was also one of the most exhilarating, stimulating, and valuable philosophical experiences I've ever had. I left the interview feeling brilliant, actually. I don't think I've ever performed quite as well in such an environment in my life. I mean, I haven't had that many experiences of this kind of thing. The only thing that approximates it in my experience was when I interviewed for a scholarship at UCL in 2016. But that involved going up to UCL and meeting with the person who wanted to supervise my master's thesis. That was also a really scary experience, and I did actually win that scholarship. So I had something I could draw upon, at least to make me feel like I've done something like this before. It's gone well, even if you don't think it's gone well. So I was very prepared, and I know myself in these ways. With the UCL interview of a few years ago, I came out of it feeling like I'd completely blown it. My partner took me for lunch after the interview and I could hardly eat. I was in this depressive funk for, well, until the day I actually got offered the scholarship. The fact that my Cambridge interview had gone, to my mind, which is really saying something, really well, I couldn't really ask for more. I got the place at Cambridge. I found out on Valentine's Day that I was offered a place on the PhD. I found out I had been nominated for funding. I find out about that in the middle of March, I think. That was it. That was my Cambridge interview, PhD experience, whatever. I hope this was helpful to some of you. I must say, personally, it's really nice to be back on YouTube. I hadn't made a video in 4 years, which is going on for a long time. Clearly, there's a lot to fill you in on, but you'll just have to let me know what kinds of videos you want to see from me. My hope for this channel is really to steer it in the direction of PhD vlogs. So wherever I end up actually going for my PhD, I thought it would be interesting and possibly helpful to document the experience. If there's anything you want to know about the application procedure for any of the universities I've applied for, how to get funding at a top UK university, because as it happens I do already have a full scholarship to go to St Andrews. So if any of that interests you, please just let me know, because I have been wayward from YouTube for far too long to have any kind of intuition about what people want to see. Thank you for watching, and I hope you will have a great day. Bye!